Hello and welcome to Fight Network Boxing Weekly. Corey Erdman and Morgan Campbell here with you. Morgan, go ahead and ring that bell. A monstrous weekend in the heavyweight division.
Yes.
We have plenty to get to today, including Deontay Wilder and Artur Szpilka, including David Haye, including Charles Martin. As well, PBC makes its debut on regular Fox, not Fox Sports, not your Fox Sports affiliates.
Yes.
Regular old Fox. So if you have channel 28, if you're in our area of wherever it is that we live,
Manhattan?
then you can get.
Don't go misleading
get PBC.
people. It might not be 28 in Manhattan.
Yeah, that's a good point. The point is, you could actually watch this fight at a bar somewhere. You don't have to huddle in front of your screen watching on premium cable. So that's always a joy for boxing fans out there. But let's jump right into the heavyweight action from over the weekend. Deontay Wilder defending his WBC heavyweight title against Artur Szpilka. You couldn't have drawn up a better result for Wilder in this particular fight, especially given everything that we said last week about the audience that was going to be tuning in for this one with the free preview weekend, added eyeballs looking at this one. The result was perfect, but Morgan, it was a whole lot more difficult than anyone thought it was going to be.
The process getting there, the end result was what Wilder wanted, but the steps it took to get there, I don't think Wilder or the people managing Wilder or trying to sell Wilder, I don't think that's necessarily what they wanted, because what they had was an opponent in Szpilka who was just really awkward, and made himself difficult to hit and difficult to time. And that was what was kind of bedeviling Wilder for the first few rounds of that fight. Because I remember watching it, I remember tweeting that Wilder round by round was doing a little bit better, but it was still, to me, if I had to score that fight officially, it would have been a nightmare because there were a lot of close rounds and closer than Wilder and the people behind Wilder would have wanted.
Yeah, and Steve Farhood even said that on the broadcast when they threw to him in the seventh round, and he had Wilder up by, I think, 2 points at that point, but he did say virtually every single round was arguable at that point. Now, I thought it was justifiable if you had Szpilka ahead at the time of the knockout. I thought that would have been okay. The judges there didn't, but I think that's okay too. I think it was just that there wasn't a whole lot going on in that fight. Szpilka is really awkward.
Yes.
And he can be difficult to hit until he decides that he's not going to be, which is what eventually happened in that ninth round. And we've seen it in the past with him when he finally decided to really open up against Brian Jennings, got himself dropped. Even when he fought a guy like Mike Mallow and very early in the fight decided, I don't need to be difficult to hit. I think I can just blast this guy out. Opens himself up and he gets dropped. That's what he does in these fights. And if you just wait it out and you show some patience, as both Wilder and his corner did, you'll get your chance.
Well, and it's funny about Wilder, because I remember you messaged me during the fight. You said, man, I don't think I've ever seen Wilder look worse than this. Mm-hmm. And that was a function of Szpilka's awkwardness. And it's also a function of Wilder, and he's obviously more advanced, demonstrably more advanced than Charles Martin is, who we'll talk about later in this broadcast. But you can still tell he's a guy that came to boxing a little bit late, and his footwork is a little bit awkward because there's times when he gets hit and he's not necessarily hurt, but he looks hurt just because of the way his feet are set and because of the way he winds up stepping in response to being hit. But what impressed me about Wilder was that eventually he started following his corner's advice, because this was one of these fights where it became pretty clear that whoever moves forward more is going to win the fight.
Yes, because both guys were uncomfortable moving back.
Yes, but it took Wilder a few rounds to get comfortable moving forward, because he's the longer guy, taller guy, longer reach. So in his head he thinks, well, I can fight moving backward. But moving backwards, he wasn't really getting much done. And the times he moved forward were the times that Szpilka didn't really know what to do. And you saw Szpilka kind of lunge in and land these left hands early. And then it got to the point where Wilder would block the left hand. You could tell his timing was getting better. He's getting a little bit more comfortable staying in the pocket. And then the knockout blow, again, that's something that you draw up. That's something that you practice, but doesn't necessarily ever actually happen in a real fight between professionals. That was like Postal and Batiste, where the opening presents itself and you just plant your foot, draw, and throw that right hand, textbook. Clipped him on the chin, and the result was the result. But you don't ever expect to see that in a fight between professionals.
No.
That textbook.
And that's kind of why, because there are some really old school people out there who do not like pad work whatsoever. They point to all these guys in the past that never had focus pads and were yet to be able.
Jim Jeffries never had pads.
Well, but even after that, they'll say, Sugar Ray Robinson never hit the pads, or Muhammad Ali, or whatever. But one of the things that they point to, and one of the things that I'll agree with them on, is that things like that, if you're doing pads, oftentimes you'll block that left hand up here and then fire back with those things don't always happen in fights, but in this case, it actually did. Just outright blocking the left hand, a quick change of levels in the right hand, and then the fight's over. It doesn't. You can draw that up, but rarely does it ever happen. A lot of what we're talking about with Wilder looking uncomfortable at times, though, or taking a little while to compute what was happening in the ring, that's not speculation. He flatly admitted to it after the fight. When they asked him about some of the difficulties he had in that fight, he said, "It's been 3 years since I fought or sparred a southpaw." So that says to me, and I don't know exactly what he meant by that, but at the very least, it meant it's been 3 years since he stepped in the ring with any southpaw.
Yeah, until
at worst in this camp, they might not have had a whole lot of southpaws for him to work with too. So this isn't speculation. This is fact, admitted fact from Wilder that he just hasn't had a lot of lefties in front of him before.
Yeah, and this is what happens too when you start the sport late. It's also what happens in the heavyweight division. How much southpaw sparring is out there available for a heavyweight? Probably not a lot. It's also a function of being in Birmingham, Alabama.
I was just about to say,
how much sparring is there available to you when you're outside of training camp?
Well, and that's the thing. And people would say, well, you're the heavyweight champion to drive a Rolls Royce. You're making $3 million for this fight. Why can't you bring anyone else in? It is a matter of convenience sometimes.
Yeah, well, you can do that for a camp. I'm just talking about
all the time.
When you're
exactly.
Six months between fights and you just need some work.
Yeah.
You're going to call in Birmingham, Alabama to come spar with you. No. And you're a southpaw.
You ask Mark Breland to turn around, I guess.
and you're a decent fighter. You're not someone I can just, steamroll in 30 seconds. That's a lot to ask.
Szpilka, I think, though, too, did exceed expectations. As much as we're saying Wilder had more trouble than we thought, Szpilka also did better than we thought.
Yes.
And I think, again, given the wide open nature of the heavyweight division, that'll be a common theme as we talk about some of the other fights that happened in the weekend. As much as we have seen Szpilka lose to Brian Jennings, we've seen him lose to Deontay Wilder, both in very conclusive fashion. I do think that there will be another opportunity for Szpilka against one of these other big names.
Yeah, well, Szpilka had a strong performance. He got knocked out, but up until that point, he was fighting pretty evenly with a heavyweight champion. Maybe not necessarily the heavyweight champion, but a guy who's more the heavyweight champion than Charles Martin is, who we'll talk about later.
Not to mention he can sell tickets, man.
Well, yes, because remember...
He can sell tickets. That's more important than anything else, probably.
Much more important. Remember we were talking about those Bobby Hits fights in Hammond, Indiana. And we're like, okay, we're going to put 10 guys on this card, and we'll see which of your fan bases buys the most tickets. And I don't care if you win or lose. Whoever sells... The 5 guys that sell the most tickets, they're on the next card. That's that. Because we were talking before the fight about, well, how is Deontay Wilder going to sell outside of Alabama? We still don't know, because in that... I don't know if Barclays Center was sold out, but it was a pretty big crowd. But in that crowd, there were clearly a preponderance of Szpilka fans.
Oh, yeah.
So Szpilka, win or lose, he's going to get other high-profile fights because promoters know and TV broadcasters know his fans will tune in. His fans will not just show up, his fans will buy tickets.
Oh, yeah. And the fact that Szpilka doesn't shy away from his past as a soccer hooligan and as a troublemaker,
right?
Just absolutely enamors the fans to him. And we've kind of known this since the beginning. I actually called Szpilka's first fight in North America, in the United States, in Atlantic City. Funny story about that fight. I was supposed to be on commentary with Vinny Paz. Supposed to be my color man. Vinny Paz just outright no-showed a pay-per-view broadcast.
Really?
Just didn't show up. So I was on my own.
Where was this?
At the resorts in Atlantic City.
Oh, man.
But Szpilka was, although he wasn't the main event, he was the main attraction.
Yep.
and they sold out the resorts at $250 a pop was the cheapest ticket. And that fight was at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on the same day that Tomas Adamek, who was a much bigger star than Szpilka was at that point, and probably still, was fighting in Brooklyn. Those fans came to see Szpilka. This is how dedicated they were to him and to boxing in general. Came to see Szpilka, and all of them got on a fleet of school buses and then drove to Brooklyn for that night to go and see Tomas Adamek. That's how much they care about Szpilka, and one loss isn't going to change that.
But boxing is dead.
Boxing's dead, though.
Boxing's a dead sport. So what's it going to take, again, because now I'm just imagining you put these guys in Chicago, right? Now we're not talking about the UIC Pavilion, right? Now we're talking about
the United Center.
United Center, yes. Or we're talking about the new arena they're building for DePaul.
Yeah.
Right? Like, this is, Szpilka has, again, and
for as long as he can last.
It does not matter that he didn't win.
Yeah.
Right? And the fight was so competitive, his fans can say, you know what? Get him next time.
Exactly.
Get him next time. Right? Because you sent me that clip of Szpilka as he gets out of the hospital, and Ronnie Shields is congratulating him. Hey, you did great. And then all his friends were just like, yeah, you were kicking his ass. Well, he wasn't kicking his ass. It was an even fight. But, the Szpilka's friends and the Szpilka's fans, hey, as far as they're concerned, that's a lucky shot. This guy's the uncrowned heavyweight champion. Let's see him again, and we will pay. And we will travel.
We will touch on that clip a little bit later on as it pertains to other heavyweights in the division, but we're going to hit the break. When we come back, we'll talk about some more post-fight activity, namely between Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury and what might come out of that. We'll be back with more here on Fight Network Boxing Weekly. Welcome back to Fight Network Boxing Weekly. Corey Erdman and Morgan Campbell here with you. As we said off the top, if you're a handler, if you're someone in the Deontay Wilder camp, you couldn't have drawn up a better result, a better highlight reel clip than what you got out of the ending of Wilder Szpilka. And to add to that, the WWE style promo
that was completely spontaneous.
Which was completely spontaneous. You couldn't have asked for anything better to come out of that. Like even if you draw that up and plan that in every way,
which they did draw up and plan in every way. Because I didn't know that people who aren't involved in the fight and aren't connected or affiliated with either fighter can just walk into the ring.
Sure, yeah.
After the fight.
Absolutely.
Here they go.
No one gave him authorization to go and do that. Listen, it came off pretty well.
Yes.
As scripted as it came off, both guys are pretty charismatic. They didn't stumble over the lines or anything like that. It sounded like pro wrestling.
Yes, it did. And I was impressed that Wilder went through a whole fight. And it was a fight, too, that there were moments he didn't know if he was going to win or lose. Winds up winning the fight and then delivers the "boy, I'll baptize you" line. Flawlessly.
Flawlessly.
Much more flawlessly than Adrian Broner has ever delivered any of his canned lines.
Oh, yeah.
So give Wilder credit for that. And then the point where they each said, well, I'll go to your backyard and fight. No, I'll go to your backyard and fight. So as I tweeted, I was like, man, I hope somebody's got a big backyard.
Who's gonna call one another's bluff? Be like, all right, come to the United Kingdom.
Right.
Come to Birmingham.
Well, there's Birmingham, Alabama, and a Birmingham, England. So either way,
exactly. Yeah, right? We're gonna fight in Birmingham.
They can fight in Birmingham,
no matter what.
Who knows? Now I don't know how the mechanism by which this fight actually winds up happening, given that Fury still has to rematch Klitschko. Mm-hmm. That outcome isn't guaranteed.
Not at all.
So this is really exciting. Helps boost Fury's profile in the United States. But I just don't know. He's got to take care of Klitschko first, and then they can talk about, what happens after that.
Well, and in reality, he has to take care of Klitschko first, and then we can talk about all these things. But we need things to talk about. Here's the funny thing, is that the whole world has kind of moved on as if that outcome is going to be the same as the first time.
Yes.
Because if it isn't, then suddenly we're back to square one. Suddenly all these things that we're excited about, we're not back to square one.
We're not back to square one because
we're set back a little bit.
Because Klitschko is old.
Right. Now people can beat Klitschko, yes.
But Klitschko's not about to reclaim this title and settle
Go on another 20-fight reign. Yeah, I understand, yeah. But it does hit the pause button.
Yes.
We have all this momentum and all this excitement, but it does still hinge on Fury winning that rematch and retaining the belt. But I will say that this confrontation has definitely generated some buzz.
Yes,
it's generated some interest, and I do think that since we can agree that this was planned in some respect,
no, it's completely spontaneous.
Even if.
Because Klitschko, he's so difficult to spot.
Right.
He just kind of snuck
Fury,
around.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry, Fury is just so snuck around 6'9", who you can just hide behind all these folks and just sneak into the ring.
Even if Showtime didn't call Fury before and say, do you want a seat in this arena and we will sit you ringside and do all that.
I feel bad for the person sitting behind Tyson Fury.
Me too. At the very least, at the very least, they said a producer ran over there. This is how this works, and said, "Okay, hop the barrier and get in the ring," which says to me that the Fury camp and Hennessy Sports and all the people, and we know people in his camp pretty well, they are okay with negotiating with Showtime, and they are not tethered to HBO in any respect. They will make this fight happen.
And that's as much as Americans complain about or lament the fact that a lot of the best heavyweights aren't American anymore. This is the advantage of having a guy that's not from the United States and isn't married to either network, so he can make deals on both sides of this divide.
He cares more about whether his fight's on Sky or Box Nation. In reality, he doesn't really care about where it airs here, right?
Well, exactly. And as we've discussed in the past, and we'll discuss again, there's a lot of action happening in the heavyweight division in England.
Sure.
So here's and Tyson Fury's in the situation where he would like the Showtime money, but he doesn't need it.
Yeah.
He doesn't need it. He has all kinds of leverage.
And all kinds of money.
Provided especially if he beats Klitschko again. And our good friend Mike Coppinger was tweeting, that he was a little bit surprised that Fury was there and seemed to be a little bit drunk.
I mean, I don't know why that's surprising at all. Yeah. I've seen Tyson Fury drunk before. I don't know why. Did you hear the full story of what happened there?
No.
So basically, Tyson Fury, after the fight, and there's like the press conference and whatnot, he manages to kind of evade everyone and doesn't want to give any interviews. Tyson Fury doesn't obey normal rules, societal norms, or laws a lot of the time. So Tyson Fury decides, and if you've been to the Barclays Center, there's the 40-40 Club, which is basically on like the second level. If you're rich, you can kind of like get a box around there. That's where you sort of hang out in intermission and whatnot. You need a pass to get in there. So Tyson Fury just walks into the 40-40 Club. Of
course he does.
Just walks into the lounge, goes behind the bar, and just grabs a bottle of vodka and just starts drinking.
Now, hold on.
Yes.
Did he grab the vodka from the well, or did he grab the good vodka?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know what kind of vodka it was, but he grabbed vodka.
Grabbed the Prince Igor.
And just the Prince Igor, the Popov, which I don't think they would serve in the 40-40. And just starts drinking. Just by himself behind this bar, and so our good pal Mike Coppinger just happened to spot him there. He's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he said, when you're the heavyweight champion, you can do whatever you want."
That is true, and that's a throwback story to like the John L. Sullivan days.
Yes.
Right?
To these hard partying fighters that we love from yesteryear.
Yes.
Tyson Fury is one of them.
And I can be any son of a bitch in the world. I was just reading this story yesterday about Jerry Jones, the owner of the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah.
Did the same thing. Like he wound up in some bar in Austin at 2:30 in the morning. He's like, "Serve us drinks." And the guy's like, "Last call was half an hour ago. I can't serve you drinks." And Jerry Jones says, "Look, if you don't serve me, I'm going to buy this place, and the first person I'm going to fire will be you. Serve us drinks."
Oh my God.
So, magically, this mini bar appears in the bathroom, and the guy starts serving Jerry Jones and his friends till 5 in the morning. This is where Tyson Fury is headed.
Well, speaking of UK heavyweights, as you alluded to, there was some action overseas. A lot of people tuned in to see David Hayes' knockout of Mark DeMori, so we'll talk about it when we come back here on Fight Network Boxing Weekly. Welcome back to Fight Network Boxing Weekly. Corey Erdman and Morgan Campbell here with you. A very busy weekend in the heavyweight division. Basically a full day of action on Saturday, and it started on Dave in the UK or on YouTube if you want to watch the live stream, as David Haye and Mark Demori went at it for about 90 seconds or so.
Yeah.
David Haye making his return to the ring after 3 years of inactivity. David Haye, muscle mass David Haye.
Seriously.
Looking bigger than ever and really looking like he's filled into the heavyweight division.
And, and that fight didn't do anything to undermine or dissuade me from my theory that Craig David, the guy that's saying fill me in, and David Haye are the same person. Because you don't ever see them in the same place at the same time. Remember Craig David, he stopped making records, showed up in Miami Beach and was jacked. Right? And now David Haye disappears from the ring for a couple years, comes back, and he looks like he's yoked. He looks like he's been hanging out with John Jones, just doing all this powerlifting. But the thing is, like, muscle mass doesn't always necessarily translate into punching power.
He says it has.
Right, but that
could also mean that his shoulder isn't ripped off the bone.
Right,
also.
Because if muscle mass and weightlifting strength and punching power are the same thing, then Evander Holyfield would be like the most powerful puncher in the history of the heavyweight division, because no one could bench press like Evander Holyfield. That guy used to knock out like 10 reps with 350 pounds on the bench press.
And you wouldn't have boxing trainers like Virgil Hunter saying, do not touch those weights, stop doing push-ups, stop.
Well, there's
stop right now.
There's a happy medium. Right. Point is, whatever David Haye has been doing appears to have helped his punching power. Now, we don't know how much of the result was a function of David Haye's increased power and technique, and how much of it was just Mark Demori not having a chin and Mark Demori being really limited. But he got the spectacular result he was looking for. Because, again, the other thing we didn't know when we did the little preview to the fight is we didn't know whether David Haye was going to go for a spectacular knockout against an opponent that he knew he could knock out in that way, or if he was going to try to go a few rounds just to knock off some of this ring rust that had accumulated over the last 2 years. We got our answer. Yeah,
I will say, before I even comment on Mark Demori's skill, if my fellow vegans out there are looking for a ringing endorsement for whether or not you can get enough protein on a vegan diet, point to muscle mass David Haye, who managed to recover from reconstructive shoulder surgery and become larger, all by eating lentils and other things.
So a lot of black beans.
So there we go.
A lot of hemp protein.
If you want a hemp protein infomercial, call up David Haye. I do think that a large function of this was due to the quality of Mark Demori as an opponent. Not to demean Mark Demori, but you can often tell just by looking at a fighter walking to the ring whether he's going to be any good or not. And you pointed out the quality of his robe.
Yeah.
I pointed out the fact that he looked to have his Team Demori t-shirts made on Cafe Press.
Yep.
And those things seemed indicative of the fact that he wasn't going to be any good when he stepped inside the ring.
That old Sheila t-shirt that I had for Halloween when I was ready for the world, probably higher quality than Mark Demori's t-shirts. And I just hope Mark Demori got paid well.
I'm sure he did. Of course he did. Yeah.
It was the fight was short, but that was a hellacious beating.
Yeah, that's bad,
right?
Yeah.
Like, he's risking his health. So I hope he got paid well. And if he's going to keep fighting, I just hope he sets his sights lower. Because he's limited, and fights with elite heavyweights, to the extent that David Haye is he is an elite heavyweight. That is not what Mark Demori should be doing if he values his health.
No, but you take that one fight, you get the payday, you take that risk for it. Listen, when you're coming off a 3-year layoff, fighting a guy like that is acceptable.
Yes.
In my mind.
It's like Mike Tyson and Peter McNeely.
It's going to happen, and he ended it very quickly. He didn't draw it out or make a more of a farce out of it than what it actually was. Also understand that when you're matching fights like this, it's tough to find a guy who both looks the part and has a decent record to kind of sell it to the fans.
Yes.
So as much as we're making fun of Mark Demori's attire, he was in shape, was in the top 15 in certain sanctioning bodies. Right. I can find a 20-0 heavyweight in Latvia and in Hungary, but he'll also come in wearing running shoes and in a bathing suit
Yes.
and a beach towel.
Yes.
So it's tough to find a guy that on paper looks acceptable, but then isn't any kind of a threat inside the ring, which is exactly what you need in this case for a guy like David Haye.
Yeah, as we were saying, like the part of the world Mark Demori's from, I don't know that he would beat our other friend, rugby league and rugby union star Sonny Bill Williams.
That's right. Yeah,
I
don't think he would.
I think Sonny Bill Williams would knock him out.
I think he would knock him out.
Spends half the year more than half the year playing.
I think
rugby.
he would knock him out.
This is not to slight Mark Demore. This it is what it is. And again, I just hope it was worth it to him. I hope he got paid well and holds on to some of that money. But I just don't want to see Mark Demore again against elite heavyweights. Because he still has a record. Because now it's just
he has 20-1 or whatever.
Just one loss.
Yeah.
Let's see how he does against who's the guy Ibeabuchi's fighting?
Oh God, Andy Ruiz.
Let's see how he does against Andy Ruiz.
Well, same thing will happen.
This is one of the finest heavyweights in Australia.
Right.
Only one loss. You could do it like that, and who's to say he wouldn't turn down that fight? And that's how guys really get hurt. So for his sake, I don't want to see that anymore.
No.
I would like to see him seek his own level if he's going to keep fighting.
But you mostly know the guy's in trouble when all the viz they have for him, and they had to fill on that broadcast for like an hour.
Right.
Poor BJ Flores is out there trying to fill for an hour talking about one fight, and they only had like the one vignette of Mark Demore, and it's all like my cell phone footage of Mark Demore knocking guys out and whatnot. So unfortunately, he didn't really add anything to the old highlight reel other than getting knocked out. So that doesn't bode well for his future prospects either.
No, again, I just hope he finds a circuit, that's more suited to his skill set.
All right, we'll talk about what is suited to David Haye's skill set in the very near future. Lots of options for him. We'll talk about those when we come back here on Fight Network Boxing Weekly. Welcome back to Fight Network Boxing Weekly. Corey Erdman and Morgan Campbell here with you. So the David Haye Mark Demore fight was what it was. It was what we expected it to be, a quick wipeout of Mr. Demore. But from the business side of things seem to be fairly successful. From what I understand, he put something in the neighborhood of 18,000 people in the arena there. That's a hefty draw. He also took a little bit of a risk and put this on a free-to-air channel called Dave in the United Kingdom, which isn't on. And now I don't have a perfect understanding of UK cable by any means, but from what I understand, it is not a cable channel.
Where's Adam Harris when you need him?
Exactly. Yeah, it's not like basic cable, but you can get it on all platforms.
Right.
But it reportedly broke all records for their broadcast numbers. It peaked at 3 million viewers, which beats the numbers for, say, Carl Frampton's title defense on ITV, which is a basic cable channel there, which peaked at like 1.9. So it averaged 1.3, peaked at 3, and keep in mind, averaging 1.3 during that fill time that we were talking about where nothing was going on. There was just like a band playing and BJ Flores talking for about an hour. Nothing going on at all.
Tuning in to listen to BJ Flores talk about David Haye.
That's right, yeah.
And folks are like, whoa, this is really interesting.
I got to wait for this,
Says a lot about, again, the state of the sport in the UK, but also people's level of interest in David Haye in particular.
Yeah.
Right? I knew he had fans. I knew he had followers. I didn't know it was like that. Just to sit there and watch somebody talk about David Haye.
For an hour.
1.3
million people just sitting there, just waiting. Yeah. Because there really was no undercard to speak of.
Right.
Thankfully, they didn't air that undercard because it was particularly bad.
I didn't see
it was actually better that they did what they did. But yeah, I mean, listen, monstrous numbers for David Haye. And I do find it interesting that the first name that he mentions in the post-fight interview is Anthony Joshua, which I think speaks to Joshua's drawing power at that point.
Speaks to a lot of things.
Because if you're David Haye, if a Joshua fight, who hasn't fought for a world title yet, you could play the card that, hey, Anthony Joshua isn't ready for me yet. He hasn't earned the shot yet. You can play that card being David Haye. But unless Joshua has some cachet and you think that it's profitable, to go out and fight Anthony Joshua, you would never take that fight. So that speaks to Joshua's popularity, I think, right now.
It's a lot of things. It's Joshua's popularity. It's also that David Haye, as we discussed last week, still doesn't have the leverage to force Tyson Fury to fight because all those years he didn't fight Tyson Fury, and now Tyson Fury has all the leverage. So it's all up to Tyson Fury as to whether or not he decides to fight David Haye. So at this point, David Haye doesn't have that leverage. And the other thing about Anthony Joshua is that he has a name, he has a reputation, he has a record. But at this point in his career, he's still learning, still is a little bit vulnerable in ways that he might not be if they fight a year from now when Haye is a year older and Joshua is a year smarter. Because we saw Joshua fight Dylan White.
Saw a bit of vulnerability.
It was an impressive win for him, but you could see there's still things he's working on. The thing about Anthony Joshua is that he's a little bit slow. So he's weak in the area that David Haye is strong. Because David Haye, because he's a smaller guy coming up from the lower weight class, is a lot faster than most of these heavyweights. That's what makes that matchup intriguing. That's the advantage that David Haye knows he has right now. A year from now, Joshua might be smarter in ways that can neutralize his lack of speed, his own lack of speed. And Haye might be a little bit slower. So right now is the time to push that fight. You beat Anthony Joshua. Now you're like the undisputed second best heavyweight in the UK. Now you have a lot more leverage and a lot more reason to lure Tyson Fury into a big money fight with you.
But does David Haye, going into that fight, does he have the leverage to put that fight on the Haymaker app like he did with this fight? Can you watch it in virtual reality in 360?
That's pretty impressive.
Which is pretty impressive. Did you watch Quillen Jacobs in virtual reality?
No.
Did you ever go back and watch that? You basically watch from the ring post. You can watch whatever you want. You can watch the crowd if you want the whole time. Yeah, it's bananas. What a time to be alive.
We'll discuss this later. Like the Haymaker app has features that the Danny Swift Garcia app has never.
It won't even touch.
Yeah, has never dreamed of.
I don't know what the Danny Swift Garcia app has actually.
It has a lot of just
pictures of Danny Swift Garcia.
Yeah, and like embedded YouTube clips of his previous fights.
Oh yeah, which are not legal at all because he doesn't have the broadcast rights to them in any way, and he
doesn't matter. They're on the app. They're on the app.
He's going against the very people who pay him.
They're on the app.
Watch these bootleg copies of my fight and give me 99 cents to download it. Not the best business move that Danny Swift Garcia's ever made. Stick to selling those flat brim hats, the flat brim hats, and making rap videos.
They are on the app, and what we should do is make a ranking of
boxer apps.
Yeah, exactly. Like Top Rank. They have a good app. I don't know how often they need to update it more often, but they partnered with MLB Advanced Media.
Right. So their streaming service is top notch.
Yes, because MLB Advanced Media, they're industry leaders.
Yes.
They don't mess around. And because they started out, making the app for Major League Baseball, and then all these other companies, not even related to sports, said, oh my goodness, we love your app so much. Help us do ours. Help us stream this. Help us do that. And this is what Top Rank wound up doing. So their app is way better than any app that might appear from the other side of the promotional divide.
Well,
but I haven't seen virtual reality on there, so Haymaker might be at the top. Of the list.
It might already be at the top of the list.
The best pound boxing app.
There's Shots. Which is only
about Shots.
Which is
Don't
only
talk to me about Shots. Listen,
Shots there.
Again, the best thing about Floyd Mayweather's retirement is that we can all erase the Shots app from our phones. I don't need it anymore. Perfect.
Well, you can replace it with the Shannon Briggs app. If you want to play like
Shannon Briggs has an app.
Oh yeah. It's like him chasing Vladimir Klitschko. I think it's like an Angry Birds sort of like ripoff, where you just go. I don't actually know the real theme of the game.
Amazing.
But yeah, if you're a boxer, you need an app these days. That's just part of hashtag branding. All right. On the other side of the break, we'll get into the other heavyweight title fight from over the weekend, and we'll talk about PBC on Fox. Danny Garcia and Robert Guerrero will be going at it. We'll be back with more here on Fight Network Boxing Weekly. Welcome back to Fight Network Boxing Weekly. Corey Erdman and Morgan Campbell here with you. Quickly want to touch on the other heavyweight title fight from over the weekend before we get into PBC on Fox for this week. Charles Martin getting a piece of the heavyweight crown, winning the IBF heavyweight title in a very fluky victory over Tsar Glazkov. A punch didn't even really land. Glazkov hurts his knee. And this is where rules are, at least with the unified rules, are kind of cloudy when it comes to freak accidents like this. Because if any kind of movement that is predicated by your opponent just being in front of you can be construed as causing that injury, then it goes as a TKO. So even if a punch doesn't land, if you can reasonably argue that a punch that landed in the past maybe tweaked your knee, or me making you move made you tweak your knee, then it gets ruled as a TKO because it wasn't a foul. So it winds up a TKO win for Martin.
And all I could picture was Arthur Mercanti saying, hey, you don't deserve to go out like this, champ. Only the ref can stop the fight.
Let me get you back in there.
You go back out there. Yuri Foreman, trust me, just go. The thing about Charles Martin is he's another guy. You look at these heavyweights and you can tell they started boxing late. A lot of times, like when you watch someone play a sport they're not super comfortable playing, you can tell.
You can just feel it sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, well, if they're bent at the waist, right? You watch someone that's never skied before and their legs are straight and their waist is bent.
Right.
Skating, same thing.
Right.
That's a little bit how Charles Martin looks boxing. But one thing he did figure out in this fight is he had this big reach advantage, right? And as we talked about with the Wilder fight, a lot of times, the guy with the reach advantage doesn't want to move forward. He's like, I don't have to move forward because the other guy has to come to me. But Charles Martin and his coaches figured out that if he moved forward without giving up the reach advantage, they would give Glazkov fits. And that's what was happening up until the point that Glazkov blew out his knee. And I would have wanted to see how that fight was going to keep developing, to see how these guys were going to adjust. But I do give Martin credit for figuring out that, hey, just because I'm the taller, not just taller, but the fighter with the longer reach, I don't have to sit here and wait for people to come to me and try to pick them off on the way in. I can come in, close the distance without giving up my reach advantage and give this guy two problems instead of just one. And that's what he was doing up until the point that Glazkov shredded his knee.
Yes, and listen, he can be forgiven for being a little bit laborious in the ring because he's only been fighting for 7 years, been boxing for 7 years. He had a very quick amateur career, had I think 68 amateur fights. He won the 2012, I want to say, police athletic championship. Yep. So this is a guy with a decent amateur career, but again, it was abbreviated. In the same way that Deontay Wilder fought in the Olympics as well, sometimes it's more about tenure and about the amount of time that you spent in the ring and whatnot. So you can see some of those things, but again, with Deontay Wilder, you can be a flawed guy and still get away with that if you have certain tools that can carry you. And I do think that Charles Martin had some pop. It felt to me like he was impacting Glazkov even before the injury. So I think that there are some tools that he can work with. But you can tell what the other heavyweights think of Charles Martin, because even Artur Szpilka in his hospital gown when he comes down in that interview, he doesn't remember anything about the fight whatsoever. But what he does tell Ronnie Shields is, hey, you know who we should fight next? The IBF champion, Charles Martin. He knows that. He knows, hey, I want to fight this guy. He remembered that from earlier on in the night. Also, the fact that Derek Chisora was in the crowd at the press conference calling him out tells you kind of the level that people perceive Charles Martin to be at. That
is the lowest hanging fruit out there.
Yes.
Right? And you become a heavyweight champ, and then you start telling people you're the heavyweight champ. Derek Chisora. I just hope he doesn't threaten to, quote, physically shoot Charles Martin.
Yeah, that wouldn't be good.
As opposed to mentally or spiritually or something like that. But yeah, this is the, and again, the IBF asked for this, right? By making Glazkov the mandatory, and then with the quick stripping of Tyson Fury and putting this belt back out on the market, and now having these two guys who are top 15 heavyweights, but guys who shouldn't necessarily be fighting for the title, but making this title fight between them, this is what they got. And now they've kind of condemned their title to, a year or two at least of mediocrity, because all the second-tier heavyweights now, because they see a guy they can beat, they're going to fight for this title.
And that's probably who he wants to fight too, right, because he can win those fights.
Yeah, because Charles Martin's not going to turn around and say, yeah, let's fight Wilder, let's fight Fury. Why would he do that? He wants to be the champ. He wants to have the belt as long as he can. So
Sure.
it's gonna be a while before somebody with a chance to beat Wilder or Fury winds up fighting for that belt.
All right, this weekend, PBC makes its debut on Fox, regular Fox, with Danny Garcia and Robert Guerrero in the main event in a welterweight battle. In my mind, Guerrero doesn't really have anything to trouble Danny Garcia at this point. I don't see any reason why Danny Garcia shouldn't win this fight. But listen, Guerrero's still going to be in your face all night long.
Yes.
But this is a guy in Danny Garcia who you could have in the top 10 pound for pound. I know you don't see him in a lot of those lists right now because people are a little bit soured to Danny Garcia, and we might have to touch on that actually next week as we're running a little bit short on time this week. But this is someone who struggled with Yoshihiro Kamagai, was basically knocked out by Aaron Martinez until he miraculously woke up after one final shot on his way down. I don't see any reason why Danny Swift shouldn't take this one handily.
Except that no one saw any reason that Danny Swift Garcia shouldn't have beaten, who was it, Figueroa?
Mauricio Herrera.
Mauricio Herrera
Yeah.
handily. Danny Swift Garcia has this way of making fights that he should win pretty close. And that was at Garcia's preferred weight class. Now he's moving up. I don't know how Guerrero gets a title fight. You know, a fight I wouldn't mind seeing is a Guerrero-Berto rematch. They're kind of at each other's level.
Yeah.
Although, again, Garcia moving up to 147, we don't know how his power is going to translate. This fight might wind up being, if not super competitive,
it'll be fun.
Interesting.
Yeah, it'll definitely be fun. And for me, is it the most competitive matchup? It may or may not be, but I think the excitement level will be definitely sufficient if you're putting on your first broadcast on Fox.
Right. It'll be entertaining.
To a whole bunch of eyeballs.
Yeah, to a whole bunch of people who might not necessarily watch boxing all the time.
And don't care who either of these guys are regardless, but hey, they're both former champions.
Yes, because when you look at Guerrero, you say, oh, wait, only 3 losses?
Right.
Hey, fought Mayweather. Ooh, he lost to Mayweather, but everyone loses to Mayweather. He has names on his resume that people recognize. Went 12 rounds with Floyd Mayweather. That's how you sell it, right?
And then Danny Garcia, former lineal champion at 140,
and then
never lost.
Right. And then if they're in this fight and it's entertaining, again, the mainstream fans that don't follow a whole lot of boxing don't quite get that Robert Guerrero probably shouldn't be in a world title fight. They don't understand any of that. What they will see is a fight that's entertaining, and they're happy.
All right, well, hopefully we get an action fight out of it at the very least. But on the other side of the break, we'll add some entertaining fights to our YouTube Classics playlist as we wrap things up here on Fight Network Boxing Week. Welcome back to Fight Network Boxing Weekly. Corey Erdman and Morgan Campbell here with you. Time to add to our YouTube Classics playlist. Morgan, go ahead. Let's give us your pick for this week.
Okay, so usually we pick fights from the 80s, sometimes from the 70s.
Yeah.
We're going to go way back, all the way back. My YouTube Classic this week comes from March 17th, 1910, because it's on YouTube, this fight.
Right.
This is amazing. This is Sam the Boston Terror Langford. He also had another nickname which is really racist that we're not going to repeat on the air. Google will tell you what that was. Versus Fireman Jim Flynn. This is the second fight. The third fight in a trilogy. I'm not going to tell you who wins, but it's the rare fight in which the guy who loses the second fight in the trilogy wins the third fight in the trilogy. So Sam Langford was like one of the great black fighters of the early 20th century. Couldn't get a shot at the heavyweight title because Jack Johnson won the title, and he said, well, I'm not going to fight you against Sam Langford because there's no money in me fighting other black guys. I'm going to go get paid, and let me go fight Jim Jeffries. And then Jim Flynn is like the policeman. Even though he's Fireman Jim Flynn, he's the policeman. So back in those days, they would build up all these great white hopes to try to knock off Johnson. They would get guys that weren't necessarily boxers, that were just big. And then they would match them with Jim Flynn to see if they actually knew how to fight. And then Jim Flynn would just beat the tar out of them, and then have to start again. So here's Flynn and Langford fighting in a Canadian and an American fighting in California in 1910. Really entertaining fight.
Entertaining fight, and Langford's so advanced technically for the time. You'll be amazed at how modern he looks for the time, and a lot of fighters will look pretty crude.
Yeah, because back then you could throw the double punch, the neck punch.
You can do anything you want.
All this stuff.
All right, in honor of underappreciated Philadelphia fighters with Danny Garcia fighting this weekend, I'm going to add some Jolton Jeff Chandler to this playlist from 1983. Guy who never got the respect that he deserved, mostly by virtue of the fact that he fought in the bantamweight division. I'm going to choose his, maybe the last time that he looked great when he fought Gabby Canizales, the pride of Laredo, Texas in 1983. Really good, solid sound, technical fight. And also, you get to hear the commentary mastery of Al Michaels calling a boxing match all on his own. You get a feel for just how good Al Michaels is. If you don't appreciate him as a football broadcaster, if you don't know how good this guy is behind the mic, you'll get a feel for it in this fight.
Jeff Chandler with one of the great Jerry curls ever. In any
we need to bring our Jeff Chandler photo in here for next week. All right, that is all the time we have for this week's program. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you guys next week.